The Galactic Concord Chamber was the largest structure ever built by living beings. It floated in the empty space between three star systems, a massive station where 4,000 different species came to talk, trade, and settle their problems without war. The main hall was so big that clouds sometimes formed near its ceiling. Today, every seat was filled. Ambassador Al of the Dominion walked to the center platform. He was 7 feet tall, covered in scales that changed color with his mood. Right now, they shimmered with pride and contempt. His claws clicked against the metal floor as he moved. Behind him, 6 warriors stood in perfect formation, their armor catching the light. They had conquered 37 species in the last 1,000 years. They were predators, evolved on a harsh world where only the strong survived. Their society was built on one simple rule: the strong take from the weak, and they had never met a species stronger than themselves. Al looked around the chamber. He saw fear in many eyes. Good. Fear was proper. Fear was correct. Species of the conquered, he began, his voice booming through the translation systems. The Dominion has completed its assessment of the species known as humans. He paused for effect. They have been classified as a subordinate species. We claim their territory, their resources, and their service. Earth and all human colonies will submit to authority within 30 standard cycles. This is not a request. This is a declaration. Silence filled the chamber. Many species looked toward the human section with pity in their eyes. Everyone knew what happened to species the declared subordinate. They became slaves, workers, sometimes food. The human delegation was small, just 5 people in simple suits. They sat quietly, their faces showing nothing. At their center was a woman with hair and calm brown eyes. Doctor, the human ambassador to the conquered. Al turned to face her directly. Human ambassador, do you understand what has been declared? Doctor stood slowly. She was short, barely reaching Al's chest. She looked fragile next to his massive armored body. She looked like prey. I understand perfectly, Ambassador Al, she said. Her voice was soft but clear. The Dominion has formally declared hostilities against the human species. This declaration has been recorded and witnessed by the full conquered. Is this correct? Al's scales flickered with amusement. Yes, this is correct. Then I must inform you that you have 30 standard cycles to withdraw this declaration. Laughter erupted from the delegation. Even some other species seemed confused. They had never withdrawn anything. They took what they wanted, always. Or what little prey? Al asked, his teeth showing in what passed for a smile. What will your tiny species do? Doctor did not smile. She did not show fear. She simply looked at him with those calm brown eyes and said, or you will learn why we are the only intelligent species from our world. The laughter stopped. Something in her voice made even Al pause, but only for a moment. He feared nothing. 30 cycles, he said dismissively. Prepare your people for service. Doctor nodded once, then turned and walked out of the chamber. Her delegation followed in silence. They did not rush. They did not look back. When the doors closed behind them, conversations exploded throughout the chamber. Most species were discussing the coming conquest. Some were calculating how to profit from human territories once they took over. A few were expressing quiet sympathy for the doomed humans. But in one corner, the delegation was doing something different. They were ancient. Their civilization was 12,000 years old. They had seen empires rise and fall. They had watched countless species make terrible mistakes. Ambassador, her skin the color of deep water, spoke quietly to her aides. Begin evacuating our citizens from space, she said. Her young aide looked confused. Ambassador, they are our trading partners. They are about to become even stronger. Why would we leave? A's large eyes, which had seen so much history, focused on something far away. I have lived for 3,000 years. I have watched the conquer many species. I know how prey behaves when faced with predators. She paused. The humans are not behaving like prey. But they are small, weak. Their fleet is nothing compared to the. Perhaps, I stood and began walking toward the exit, but I heard something in that human woman's voice, something I have only heard a few times in my long life. She stopped at the door. She was not afraid. She was not desperate. She was not even angry. What was she then? I looked back at her aide. Patient. She sounded like someone who has been waiting for this moment, preparing for it. And that young one terrifies me more than any fleet. In another part of the station, Doctor walked with her team through quiet corridors. One of her aides, a young man named Thomas, finally spoke. Ambassador, what do we do now? We cannot fight their fleet is 10 times the size of ours. Their warriors are twice our size. This is impossible. Doctor stopped walking. She turned to face her team. For the first time, a small smile appeared on her face, but it was not a happy smile. It was the smile of someone who knew a secret that others did not. Thomas, she said gently, what do you know about human history? I studied it in school. Wars, progress, exploration. Yes, but did you ever wonder why, out of all the millions of species that evolved on Earth, only one became intelligent? Only one built cities and ships and reached for the stars. Thomas shook his head. Because we killed the rest, or we outlasted them. Everything that was bigger, faster, stronger than us, we found a way to defeat. We hunted animals 10 times our size. We survived ice ages that killed 90% of all life. We climbed out of extinction again and again. She began walking again. The galaxy thinks we are young. They think we are weak because we have only been in space for 200 years. They see our small ships and our peaceful words and they see prey. But we are not prey. Doctor laughed softly. No, Thomas, we are something far more dangerous. We are predators who have learned to look like prey, and the just made the worst mistake any species can make. What mistake? She stepped into the shuttle that would take them back to human space. As the doors closed, she answered. They announced their intentions. They gave us time to prepare, and they assumed that because we choose peace, we are incapable of war. Her eyes hardened. They are about to learn that humans did not choose peace because we are weak. We chose peace because we know exactly what we become when we choose war. The shuttle launched into the darkness between stars, carrying its passengers toward a species that was about to remember what it truly was. The first week after the declaration was quiet, too quiet. Intelligence officers watched human space with great interest. They expected panic. They expected desperate calls for help to other species. They expected refugees fleeing toward neutral territory. Instead, they saw something that confused them deeply. Human merchant ships were calmly withdrawing from neutral stations. Not running, just leaving. Human tourists canceled their trips with polite apologies. Human diplomats became extremely friendly and helpful, answering every question with patience and kindness. It is strange, reported intelligence chief to the high command. They are not behaving like conquered prey. They are behaving like hosts who are politely asking guests to leave before something happens. The high command laughed. What could possibly happen? The fleet was the largest in the sector. Their warriors were legendary. Humans were soft creatures from a soft world. But could not shake his unease. He had studied human history. He had read about their wars, their conflicts, their terrible weapons. He had seen images of their past, mushroom clouds, burned cities, mass graves. These were not the actions of a peaceful species. These were the scars of predators who had turned their teeth against each other. 2 weeks before the deadline, something changed. Across human space, sealed orders were being opened. On the bridge of the UNS Thermopylae, Commander James read his orders 3 times before he believed them. The Thermopylae was officially a defensive patrol vessel. It was a modest ship designed to protect cargo routes and respond to emergencies. At least, that was what the rest of the galaxy believed. That was what they believed. Commander looked at his crew. Good people. Engineers, soldiers, scientists, they had families, they had dreams, and now they had orders that would change everything. All hands, he announced over the ship's communication system, this is the commander. We are now operating under contingency Omega. Our species has been declared prey by the Dominion. You all know what this means. You all trained for this. I wish it had never come, but it has, and we will do our duty. Throughout the ship, his crew responded with calm efficiency. No panic, no tears. They had known this day might come. Every human in the fleet had known. In the cargo holds, sealed containers were opened for the first time since the ship was built. Inside were weapons that the galaxy had never seen. Weapons that humanity had created and hidden away, hoping they would never be needed. Hidden panels slid open, revealing armor plating that tripled the ship's protection. Engine systems that had been running at 20% power were brought to full capacity. The modest patrol vessel that they had counted and dismissed began to transform into something else entirely. Watched his ship change and felt a strange mixture of pride and sadness. Humanity had worked so hard to appear harmless. They had built their civilization on peace and cooperation. They had made friends, traded fairly, and never threatened anyone. And they had done all of this while quietly preparing for the day when someone would mistake their kindness for weakness. Similar scenes were happening across all of human space. Ships that looked like freighters revealed hidden weapons. Stations that looked like trading posts powered up defensive systems that could crack planets. And everywhere, humans who had spent their lives as engineers and teachers and artists remembered the other skills their species had perfected over millions of years. The skills of hunters, the skills of survivors, the skills of a species that had never, not once in its entire history, accepted extinction as an option. On the border of human space, a scout ship named the Crimson Talon was conducting routine surveillance. Captain was bored. He had been watching empty space for days, waiting for the human fleet to run. Captain, his sensor officer reported, I am detecting energy signatures from the human side. Leaned forward with interest. Their fleet is finally moving, running away. No, Captain, the officer's voice was strange, uncertain. They are not running, they are coming toward us. Show me. The main screen lit up with sensor data, felt his scales turn pale. The human second fleet was advancing toward the border, but it was not the modest collection of patrol vessels that intelligence had reported. These ships were different, larger, bristling with weapons, moving in perfect formation with a speed that should have been impossible. How many ships? Demanded. 47 confirmed, Captain, but their energy signatures are. The officer stopped, rechecked his readings, then continued with fear in his voice. Their energy signatures suggest weapons capability far beyond our estimates. Each of these ships reads as equivalent to a battle cruiser. Some read as equivalent to our dreadnoughts. Stared at the screen. This was wrong. Humans did not have this technology. Their ships were weak. Their weapons were primitive. Every intelligence report said so. Unless the intelligence reports were wrong. Unless the humans had wanted everyone to believe they were weak. Send a warning to High Command, ordered. Priority 1, tell them. The communication officer interrupted. Captain, we are being hailed by the human fleet. Put it through. A human face appeared on the screen. A woman with dark skin and silver hair, wearing a military uniform covered in medals. Vessel, she said calmly, this is Admiral Sarah of the United Human Fleet. You are conducting surveillance on our territory. We have tolerated this because we are a patient people, but patience has limits. She smiled, and it was not a friendly smile. You have 12 hours to withdraw from our sensor range. If you do not withdraw, we will assume you are the advanced scout for an invasion force, and we will respond accordingly. You threaten us, tried to sound brave, but his voice cracked. The Dominion will crush you. Admiral's smile faded. The Dominion has made a terrible mistake. They looked at us and saw prey because we choose peace. They forgot something important about our species. She leaned closer to the camera. We did not evolve as prey. We evolved as persistence hunters. We would chase our food across entire continents until it collapsed from exhaustion. We would follow it for days, for weeks, never stopping, never resting, until it simply could not run anymore. She paused, letting her words sink in. Right now, you are the ones running, and we have just started to chase. I suggest you run faster. The transmission ended. Captain immediately ordered his ship to retreat at maximum speed. As they fled toward space, he sent his final report to High Command. They are not running, he wrote, his claws trembling as he typed. They are coming, and they are not what we thought they were. They are not prey. They have never been prey. We have awakened something terrible. May the ancestors protect us all. The message reached High Command 3 hours later. By then, it was already too late. The attack fleet arrived in the 442 system with all the confidence of a species that had never truly lost a war. 200 warships, including 12 dreadnoughts, 50 battlecruisers, and over 100 smaller vessels. It was the largest fleet that had assembled in 3 centuries. Grand Admiral stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Dominance. His scales glowed with anticipation. Today, he would add another species to the collection. Today, humans would learn their place. Scan the system, he ordered. Find their defensive positions. His officers worked quickly. Then they stopped. Then they checked their readings again. Grand Admiral, the sensor chief reported slowly, the humans are not in defensive positions. They are waiting for us, in attack formation. Laughed, they think to attack us with what? Their toy ships. Sir, I am reading 43 human vessels, but these are not the ships from our intelligence files. These ships are different. Different how? Larger, much more heavily armed, and they are not running. They are advancing toward us. Felt the first tiny flicker of doubt, but he pushed it away. He feared nothing. All ships, attack formation. Show these humans what happens to prey that forgets its place. The fleet surged forward, 200 ships against 43. The math was simple. The outcome was certain. The battle lasted 11 minutes. Third Claw was a young officer on the dreadnought Crushing Fury. He had dreamed of this day since childhood, dreamed of proving himself in battle against worthy enemies. But what he saw through the viewport was not battle. It was slaughter. The human ships moved in ways that should have been impossible. They twisted and turned at speeds that would crush any crew. Their weapons fired with terrible precision, each shot finding weak points in armor that were supposed to be secret. And their tactics were unlike anything had ever seen. A battle cruiser, the Pride of Conquest, was disabled by the first exchange of fire. Expected the humans to capture it, to take prisoners. Instead, 2 human destroyers approached and fired again and again until nothing remained but debris. They are not taking prisoners, whispered. Why would they? Said an older officer beside him. We declared them prey. Prey does not take prisoners from predators. Prey kills predators, every single one, so they can never hunt again. The human fleet cut through the formation like a blade through water. Every ship worked in perfect coordination. Every attack served a purpose. There was no glory-seeking, no individual heroics, just cold, efficient destruction. And then saw something that would haunt him for the rest of his life. A human cruiser, the Stalingrad, took a direct hit that destroyed its main engines. The ship was dead. It could not escape. Any sensible crew would surrender or abandon ship. The Stalingrad did neither. Instead, it turned toward the nearest dreadnought. With its remaining power, it accelerated straight at the massive ship. The human crew knew they were dead. They chose to make their death mean something. The collision destroyed both ships. Stared at the expanding cloud of debris. Inside his mind, something fundamental was breaking. The conquered because they were willing to die for dominance. But these humans, These humans were willing to die just to take one more enemy with them, not for glory, not for territory, just to protect their people. "What are they?" he heard himself ask. No one answered. Across the battlefield, similar scenes were playing out. Human ships that were too damaged to fight would accelerate toward vessels on suicide runs. Human crews broadcast calm tactical reports even as their ships burned around them. One recording, captured by sensors, would be studied by military historians for centuries. A human captain, his bridge on fire, calmly reported, "Engineering is gone, weapons offline, life support failing. Estimate 4 minutes of combat capability, selecting target. May we find peace in the next life, ramming speed." No fear, no despair, just acceptance and determination. The fleet broke. Ships that had never retreated in their entire service history turned and fled. Grand Admiral, who had boasted of easy victory, was screaming orders that no one followed. His crew was too terrified to fight. When the human fleet finally stopped pursuing, they had lost 63 ships. Humanity had lost 12, but the numbers did not tell the true story. The surviving ships carried crews that were broken in ways that did not show on medical scans. Warriors who had believed themselves to be the ultimate predators had discovered that they were not even close. They had met a species that did not fight for dominance or territory or pride. Humans fought to end threats, permanently. Grand Admiral sat alone in his quarters after the retreat. His scales had turned a sickly color. His claws trembled. He wrote his report to High Command with shaking hands. "We were wrong about everything," he wrote. "The humans are not prey, they are not even predators in the way we understand the word. They are something else, something worse. They are survivors. Their entire species is built on one simple principle: whatever tries to kill them, they kill first. And they do not stop. They do not negotiate. They do not show mercy. They end the threat completely so it can never threaten them again." He paused, then added his final words. "I have fought many species. I have seen fear in many eyes, but I have never seen what I saw today in human eyes. They were not afraid of death. They expected it, accepted it, used it as a weapon. A species that does not fear death cannot be conquered. It can only be destroyed or appeased, and I do not believe we can destroy them." He sent the report, then sat in the darkness for a long time. 3 days later, the High Command received the battle data. They watched the recordings in complete silence. They saw their mighty fleet broken by a force less than a quarter its size. They saw their warriors flee from creatures half their height. One of the eldest commanders, a veteran of 50 campaigns, finally spoke. "What have we done?" she asked. "What have we awakened?" No one had an answer. But deep in human space, Admiral was already planning the next phase. The defense had succeeded. Now came the response, and humanity would make sure that no species ever made this mistake again. The Dominion had ruled their part of the galaxy for 3,000 years. They had conquered 37 species. They had built an empire across 200 star systems. They believed they were invincible. They learned the truth in 7 weeks. It began with small things. Supply convoys disappeared without a trace. Military communication stations went silent. Patrol ships that ventured too far from protected space simply never returned. The search parties. The search parties also vanished. Then the messages started. General was the commander of the Third Army. He woke one morning to find a data chip on his bedside table. He lived in a fortress, surrounded by guards, protected by the best security systems his species had ever created. No one could have entered his quarters. The chip contained one file, a photograph of his daughter playing in the garden of her school, a school that was supposedly secret, a school on a planet deep inside space. With the photograph was a simple message: "We can reach anyone, anywhere, anytime. Remember this." Similar messages appeared across the Dominion. Military leaders received images of their families. Politicians received recordings of their private conversations. Admirals received the exact coordinates of their ships, updated in real time. The humans were not just fighting a war. They were demonstrating that they had already won. The High Command held an emergency meeting. They needed a new strategy. They needed to strike back. But every plan they proposed fell apart when they realized that humans somehow already knew about it. "How?" screamed War Master, slamming his massive fist on the table. "How do they know everything?" No one could answer. The truth was too terrible to accept. Humans had been watching them for years, perhaps decades. They had placed spies in every organization. They had cracked every code. They had mapped every secret base. And they had done all of this while appearing to be a harmless, peaceful species interested only in trade and friendship. The galaxy's greatest predators had been hunted without even knowing it. 2 weeks into the war, human forces struck their first offensive targets. They did not attack cities or civilians. They attacked military bases with surgical precision. They destroyed shipyards and weapons factories. They crippled the infrastructure that kept the war machine running. And they did it almost without casualties. They tried to respond. They sent their remaining fleets to defend key positions. The humans simply went around them, striking unprotected targets. When they concentrated their forces, humans scattered and struck from every direction. When they spread out, humans concentrated and broke through their lines. It was like fighting smoke. Every time they closed their fists, there was nothing there. In the Galactic Concord Chamber, representatives of 4,000 species watched the war with growing amazement. Some felt satisfaction watching the, who had bullied so many, finally face a species they could not bully. Others felt fear, realizing that humans could have done this to anyone at any time. Doctor returned to the chamber to deliver humanity's terms for peace. She walked to the center platform, the same place where Al had declared humanity subordinate just weeks ago. The same seats were filled, but the mood was very different. "Representatives of the conquered," she began, "humanity did not want this war. We have worked for 2 centuries to build peaceful relationships with every species we encountered. We traded fairly. We helped those in need. We asked nothing but to be left alone." She paused, looking around the chamber. "The Dominion looked at our peaceful ways and saw weakness. They were wrong. We choose peace because we know what we become when we choose war. We know the darkness that lives inside our species. We have seen what humans do when we stop holding back." She activated a holographic display. Images appeared. The aftermath of battles, the ruins of military bases, the shattered remains of their fleet. "In 7 weeks, we have destroyed 40% of the military. We have crippled their economy. We have exposed every secret they tried to hide." Her voice hardened. "And we have not yet used our serious weapons." The chamber fell completely silent. "Every weapon you have seen us use is a defensive weapon, designed to protect ourselves with minimum destruction. You have not yet seen what we created for offense. Weapons we built hoping we would never need them. Weapons designed not to win wars but to end species." She looked directly at the delegation. Their new ambassador, who had replaced Al after his execution for failure, was trembling visibly. "We offer peace," Doctor continued. "Our terms are simple: complete withdrawal from all conquered territories, freedom for every species under control, reparations for the damage you have caused, reduction of your military to defensive forces only. Accept these terms and we stop. Refuse and we continue, until there is nothing left to continue against." The ambassador found his voice. "You cannot impose terms. You are prey. We are the Dominion. We have ruled for 3,000 years. We do not submit." Doctor smiled. It was the same smile she had shown weeks ago, patient, cold, certain. "You still do not understand," she said softly. "You are not negotiating with prey. You are negotiating with the species that hunted mammoths with sharpened sticks, that walked across frozen continents, That split the atom and touched the face of God and weaponized both. She stepped closer to the delegation. You are negotiating with humanity. And right now, in this moment, we are being merciful. We are offering you a future. Because despite everything you have done, we do not want to destroy you. We do not enjoy killing. We are not like you. Her eyes hardened. But if you force us to choose between your survival and ours, there is no choice at all. We will do what we have always done. We will survive, at any cost. The ambassador demanded time to consult his government. Doctor gave him 12 hours. In those 12 hours, 3 more military installations went dark. Each time the attacking force left a single message. 11 hours remaining, 10 hours remaining, 9 hours remaining. When the deadline arrived, the ambassador returned to the chamber. His scales were with defeat. His voice was barely a whisper. We accept your terms. Doctor nodded. A wise choice. The war is over. We will begin supervising your withdrawal from conquered territories immediately. Any violation of these terms will be considered a new declaration of hostilities. She paused. I suggest you do not make that mistake twice. She turned and walked out of the chamber. Behind her, the most powerful empire in the sector had just surrendered to a species they had dismissed as prey. The galaxy would never see humanity the same way again. The war had lasted 53 days. The aftermath would last for generations. Across the former dominion, enslaved species were being freed. Humans oversaw the process with the same cold efficiency they had shown in war. They asked for no territory. They took no resources. They simply ensured that every species that had conquered was given the chance to govern themselves again. Some of these species had been enslaved for centuries. They had forgotten what freedom felt like. Human advisors helped them rebuild, asked nothing in return, and left when their help was no longer needed. Why? Asked one freed leader, a being called a whose people had served for 400 years. You could take anything you wanted. We would have given it gladly. Why do you ask for nothing? The human advisor, a young woman named Lieutenant, thought about the question for a long moment. Because we know what it means to be oppressed, she finally said. Our own species spent most of its history fighting itself. We enslaved each other, killed each other, nearly destroyed ourselves several times. We learned, eventually, that freedom is not something you can give to someone else. It is something they must claim for themselves. We can only help create the conditions that make it possible. I did not fully understand, but he remembered the lesson. On Earth, memorials were being built for those who had fallen in the war. The names were read at ceremonies across the planet. Farmers and soldiers, scientists and poets, teachers and engineers, people from every nation and culture who had answered the call when their species needed them. Commander James attended one such ceremony on a rainy afternoon in Geneva. He stood among thousands of others, listening to the names being read. Some of those names belonged to people he had known, friends, comrades, good people who had died so that humanity could survive. An observer had been invited to attend. Ambassador stood beside, her ancient eyes watching the ceremony with an expression he could not read. You are quiet, said softly, as the rain continued to fall. I am thinking, replied. I have lived for 3,000 years. I have watched many species rise and fall. I thought I understood war, but I do not understand yours. What confuses you? I gestured at the ceremony. This, your grief is real, your loss is genuine, and yet you fought without hesitation. You died without fear. How can a species that values life so highly be so willing to end it? Was silent for a long moment, watching the rain fall on the black stone memorial. Because we understand something that the never did, he finally said. Life is precious because it ends. We do not want to fight. We do not want to die, but we are willing to do both because we know that some things are worth dying for. He looked at her. The fought for dominance, for pride, for territory. We fought for survival, for our children, for our future. There is no comparison. And now you have one. You have proven that you are the strongest species in the sector. What will you do with that power? Almost laughed. The same thing we have always done. Trade, explore, build, help where we can, make friends where possible. He paused. We did not want this power, we did not seek it. We simply refused to die when someone decided we should. The ceremony continued. More names were read, more tears were shed, and watching from a distance, representatives of dozens of species learned something important about humanity. They did not celebrate their victory, they mourned their losses. In the Galactic Concord Chamber, a historic vote was taking place. For the first time in the Concord's history, a species was being elevated to Tier 1 status without meeting the traditional requirements. Humanity was too young, their territory too small, their population too modest. By every normal measure, they should have remained a minor power for another 1,000 years. But normal measures no longer applied. The vote was not close. 3,712 species voted in favor, 203 voted against, 85 abstained. Humanity was now officially recognized as one of the great powers of the galaxy. A young diplomatic aide asked Ambassador why she had pushed so hard for this resolution. Because the galaxy needs to understand what humanity is, the ancient being replied, and what they are not. What are they? Considered her words carefully. They are not conquerors. They prove that by asking nothing from thee except that they stop threatening others. They are not saints. They prove that by the ruthless efficiency of their war. They are something in between, something the galaxy has not seen before. And what is that? Guardians. A's large eyes seem to look into the distant future. A species that would prefer to be left alone but will not stand by while innocents suffer. A species that hates war but will not lose one. A species that offers friendship first and violence last but has perfected both. She paused. The galaxy has many predators. Now it also has a protector, one that is watching, one that is waiting, and one that, as the learned, should never be mistaken for prey. On Earth, in a small garden outside a modest house, Doctor sat watching her play. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. For the first time in months, she felt at peace. A young reporter had been waiting patiently for an interview. When finally acknowledged her, the reporter asked a question that many in the galaxy wanted answered. Ambassador, looking back at everything that happened, do you have any regrets? Watched her for a moment before answering. They were laughing, chasing each other through the flowers. So innocent, so unaware of the terrible things that had been done to protect them. Only one, she finally said. I wish they had not forced us to show them. We really are quite peaceful when nobody threatens what we love. But you were prepared. You had been preparing for years, decades maybe. Yes, nodded slowly. We hoped we would never need those preparations. We prayed that no species would ever be foolish enough to threaten us. But we also knew that hope and prayer are not strategies, so we prepared, quietly, secretly, building strength that we hoped would never be used. Were you afraid when they made their declaration? Thought about the question. She remembered standing in the conquered chamber, facing a creature twice her size who looked at her and saw nothing but food. She remembered the cold certainty that had filled her in that moment. No, she said, I was not afraid, I was relieved in a strange way. The waiting was over. The pretending was done. For 200 years we had worn a mask, pretending to be something we were not. When they made their declaration, we could finally take that mask off. And what was behind the mask? Smiled. For just a moment, the reporter saw something ancient in her eyes. Something that had crawled out of caves, crossed frozen wastelands, survived extinction events that had killed 90% of all life on Earth. Something that had looked up at the stars and said, we will not go quietly. Behind the mask, said softly, was everything we have always been. Survivors, fighters, hunters, dreamers. A species that stubbornly refuses to accept that anything is impossible. a species that faces death and says not today. She looked back at her, a species that loves peace but will never purchase it at the cost of freedom. The interview ended. The reporter left. And as darkness fell over Earth, Doctor sat in her garden and watched the stars appear, one by one. Out there somewhere, other species were learning the lesson that they had learned. They were hearing the stories, watching the recordings, studying the impossible victory of a young species against an ancient empire. And they were learning a truth that would shape galactic politics for to come. Humans were small, humans were soft, humans were young. But humans were never, ever prey. And any species foolish enough to forget that lesson would learn it the same way they had, quickly, painfully, completely. The galaxy had many predators. Now it had a guardian too. And the guardian was watching.